The certified letter from the Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before opening it that my life was about to get complicated. My name is Samuel Davidson, and for the past 3 years, I had been running a successful portable storage container rental business from my property in Riverside, California. The business started small, just a few containers I would rent out to people who needed temporary storage during moves or renovations. It grew steadily, and by the time that letter arrived, I had 40 containers strategically placed across the county, generating enough income to support my family comfortably while giving me the flexibility to be present for my 2 kids. The letter was from Patricia Henderson, the president of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside me, as I read through the formal language that basically told me my business was now illegal according to newly amended HOA rules. They were demanding I cease operations immediately or face fines starting at $500 per day. I read it 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise a little higher. My wife Sarah had left for her nursing shift an hour earlier, and the kids were at school. I was alone with this bombshell, trying to figure out how 3 years of legitimate business operation could suddenly become a violation. The thing was, I operated everything properly. The containers were never stored on my residential property. I kept 1 truck and a small trailer in my driveway for pickups and deliveries, but the containers themselves were stored at a commercial facility I rented 15 miles away. My home office was just that, an office. I took calls, managed bookings, handled paperwork, and coordinated logistics. It was no different than thousands of other home-based businesses operating in America. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office number listed on the letterhead. A woman answered after 2 rings, her voice dripping with manufactured sweetness. Meadowbrook Heights HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi, this is Samuel Davidson. I just received a letter about my business and I need to speak with Patricia Henderson. Oh. The sweetness evaporated. Mr. Davidson. Yes, Patricia mentioned you might call. She's available this afternoon at 2 o'clock if you would like to schedule an appointment. An appointment? I live in this neighborhood. I am not asking for an audience with royalty. I need to understand what is happening here. Mr. Davidson, I understand you are upset, but Patricia operates on a schedule. 2 o'clock today or Thursday at 10. Those are your options. I agreed to 2 o'clock and spent the next few hours digging through every piece of paperwork related to my HOA agreement. When I had purchased the house 5 years ago, there were certainly rules about commercial vehicles, noise ordinances, and property maintenance, but nothing that prohibited running a home office. I had even checked before starting the business. At 1:30, I drove the short distance to the HOA office, a converted house at the entrance of our subdivision. Patricia Henderson kept me waiting until 2:20. When she finally emerged from her office, I recognized her immediately. She was the woman who had complained at the last community meeting about someone's lawn being a 1/4 inch too tall. Mid-50s, with highlighted blonde hair styled in that specific way that suggested multiple weekly salon appointments, and an expression that looked like she perpetually smelled something unpleasant. Mr. Davidson, she said, not offering her hand. Please come in. Her office was aggressively decorated with motivational posters about leadership and community. A large desk dominated the space, and she positioned herself behind it like a judge preparing to deliver a sentence. I assume you received our letter, she began. I did, and I need you to explain what rule I am violating. She pulled out a folder, moving with deliberate slowness that I recognized as a power play. The board met last month and updated our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. We specifically added language prohibiting commercial businesses from operating within the subdivision. I do not operate within the subdivision. I have a home office, which is completely standard. You advertise this address as a mailing address and phone contact, yes. That is legal and normal. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Mr. Davidson, let me be direct. Several residents have complained about the commercial nature of your activities. We have reports of your truck coming and going at all hours, of business calls being conducted loudly enough for neighbors to hear, and of the general disruption your enterprise causes to our peaceful community. That is ridiculous. My nearest neighbor is 200 feet away. I make deliveries during normal business hours, and I have never conducted business loudly enough for anyone to hear. Who complained? I am not at liberty to share that information. Of course you are not. I tried to keep my voice level. Patricia, I have operated this business for 3 years without a single issue. Now suddenly there is a problem. This seems targeted. The timing of our updated rules is irrelevant to your compliance. You have until Friday to cease operations or the fines begin, $500 per day. I stood up. I will be contesting this. You cannot simply change rules retroactively and expect immediate compliance. There are laws about proper notice and reasonable accommodation. Contest it all you like. The HOA board voted unanimously. The rules are the rules, Mr. Davidson. I left her office furious but determined. On my drive home, I called my buddy Marcus Chen, who happened to be a real estate attorney. We had played basketball together in college and stayed close over the years. He agreed to meet me that evening at a sports bar halfway between our houses. Marcus arrived wearing his standard post-work uniform of jeans and a polo shirt, his suit jacket discarded hours ago. We ordered beers and wings, and I laid out the situation. Did they give proper notice of the rule change? He asked, taking notes on his phone. I never received anything. The first I heard of it was today's letter. They are required to notify all residents 30 days before any rule changes take effect. Did they hold a meeting? Not that I know of, and I try to stay informed. Marcus nodded slowly. This sounds like they either did not follow proper procedure, or they deliberately excluded you from the notification process. Either way, you have grounds to fight this. The problem is, fighting an HOA is expensive and time-consuming. I cannot just shut down my business, Marcus. This is how I feed my family. I know, let me do some research. In the meantime, document everything. Every delivery, every call, every interaction with neighbors. If they are claiming disruption, we need to prove otherwise. Over the next week, I did exactly that. I also started asking around the neighborhood, trying to find out who had complained about my business. The response surprised me. My immediate neighbors, the Johnsons and the Ramirez family, both expressed confusion. They had not even known what I did for a living, let alone complained about it. The Johnsons' teenage son had helped me load containers a few times for extra cash. Mrs. Ramirez thought I just worked from home doing computer stuff. The next person I spoke with was Tom Morrison, a retired firefighter who lived 3 houses down and served on the HOA board. When I caught him getting his mail on Thursday afternoon, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Sam, I wanted to call you, but Patricia said it would be inappropriate. Tom, what is really going on here? He glanced around like we were conducting a drug deal instead of having a conversation on a public street. Look, between you and me, there was only one complaint, from Patricia herself. What? Why would she even care? Her nephew moved here about 6 months ago, lives over on Maple Drive. He has been trying to start his own moving business, and apparently he sees your container rental service as competition. The pieces clicked into place. So she manufactured a crisis to shut me down and help her nephew. I voted against the rule change for what it is worth. So did Jennifer Park. But Patricia, her husband Donald, and Keith Murphy outvoted us. The whole thing felt rushed and personal. "Why did you not say something?" Tom sighed. "Because I am retiring to Arizona in 3 months and I do not need the headache." "I know that is cowardly, but Patricia can make your life miserable if you cross her. You are about to find that out firsthand." He was right. On Friday, when I had not shut down my business, a formal notice of fine was delivered. $500 for the first day of non-compliance. I called Marcus immediately. "They cannot enforce this," he said. "We will file an injunction. But Sam, we need to play this smart. I have been researching and there is something interesting. The Riverside Chamber of Commerce has been running a small business support program. They specifically work with entrepreneurs facing regulatory challenges. I think you should reach out to them." "How does that help with the HOA, public pressure?" HOAs operate in a legal gray area where they have power, but they also rely on being seen as reasonable community organizations. If the local Chamber of Commerce backs you, it changes the narrative from a rule violation to a successful local business being harassed. I had never been particularly involved with the Chamber of Commerce, though I had attended a few networking events when I first started the business. The next Monday morning, I called their main office and explained my situation to the receptionist. She transferred me to Amanda Roberts, the Director of Small Business Advocacy. Amanda listened to my entire story without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Davidson, we have been seeing an increasing number of cases like this. HOAs overreaching their authority to shut down home-based businesses. It is becoming a real problem for economic development in the region. Would you be willing to let us feature your case? Feature it how?" "We are hosting our annual Business Excellence Awards next month. We have been considering adding a new category specifically for entrepreneurs who overcome regulatory challenges to build successful businesses. Your story fits perfectly. Plus, we have some connections with local media." A little sunshine tends to make HOAs nervous. I do not want to be the face of some publicity campaign. I just want to run my business. I understand, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. If Patricia Henderson wants to abuse HOA power to eliminate competition for her nephew, she should face consequences. Let us help you. I discussed it with Sarah that night after the kids went to bed. She was initially hesitant about getting involved in anything public, but she also knew how much the business meant to us. Not just financially, but personally. I had spent years in corporate sales before starting the container rental business, and I had been miserable. Long hours, constant travel, missing soccer games and school plays. The business gave me autonomy and presence. It let me be the dad and husband I wanted to be. "Do it," Sarah finally said. "But be prepared for Patricia to escalate." She was right. The following week, I received another letter, this time threatening legal action to place a lien on my property for unpaid fines, which had now accumulated to $3,500 according to their math. Marcus immediately filed an injunction in San Bernardino County Superior Court, arguing that the HOA had failed to follow proper notification procedures, and that the rule itself was overly broad and potentially discriminatory. The same day Marcus filed, I met with Amanda Roberts and her team at the Chamber of Commerce office in downtown Riverside. She had assembled an impressive group, including a public relations consultant, a local news producer she knew personally, and David Nguyen, who served on the Chamber's board and owned a successful property management company. "Here is what we are thinking," Amanda began, pulling up a presentation on a large monitor. "We announce you as a finalist for the inaugural Resilience in Business Award. We do not mention the HOA conflict directly in the initial announcement, but we make sure to highlight your story. Local guy built a business from nothing, provides valuable service to the community. If reporters ask about challenges you have faced, you mention the HOA situation, factually, without emotion." Meanwhile, David added, "I reach out to my contacts on the city council. Riverside has been trying to position itself as business-friendly. An HOA crushing a successful local business is exactly the kind of story that undermines that message." The PR consultant, a sharp woman named Rachel Kim, jumped in. "We also leverage social media. Not in an aggressive way, but we share your story on the Chamber's platforms. Let people organically discover what is happening. HOAs thrive in darkness. They hate scrutiny." Over the next 2 weeks, things moved fast. The Chamber of Commerce announced 3 finalists for the Resilience in Business Award. My business was featured alongside a woman who had opened a successful food truck after escaping domestic violence, and a veteran who had built a solar installation company despite losing his legs in Afghanistan. The Press Enterprise, Riverside's main newspaper, ran a feature on all 3 finalists. The reporter, a young woman named Jessica Torres, was sharp. She asked good questions about how I had built the business, what challenges I had faced, and what my future plans were. When she asked about obstacles, I mentioned the HOA situation factually, just like Amanda had coached me. "An HOA is trying to shut down your business. Why? That is what I have been trying to understand. I operate completely within the law and I had no issues for 3 years. Then suddenly, they changed the rules and are demanding I cease operations immediately. Do you have any idea what prompted the change? I have heard some things, but I would rather not speculate publicly. What I will say is that the timing is suspicious, and the process they followed in changing the rules appears to have violated their own bylaws." The story ran on a Sunday, with a photo of me standing next to one of my storage containers. By Monday morning, it had been shared hundreds of times on social media. The comments section was full of people sharing their own HOA horror stories. Several local business owners reached out to express support. Patricia Henderson was not happy. I received an email from her Tuesday morning, marked urgent, demanding I cease making defamatory statements about the HOA. Marcus advised me not to respond directly and instead forwarded it to him. He sent back a brief reply explaining that I had made only factual statements about a matter of public interest, and that any attempt to silence me would be viewed as retaliation. That Friday, I had a court hearing on the injunction. Marcus had warned me that these were usually quick procedural matters, but Judge Linda Morrison took her time reviewing the case. Patricia attended with the HOA's attorney, a nervous-looking man named Gerald Flynn, who seemed like he would rather be anywhere else. Judge Morrison asked pointed questions about the notification process. Flynn fumbled through explanations about email notifications and website postings. The judge asked if they had records proving I had received notice. Flynn admitted they did not specifically track individual delivery confirmations. "So you changed rules that could potentially destroy someone's livelihood, and you cannot prove you properly notified him." Judge Morrison was not impressed. "Your Honor, the rules were posted in accordance with our standard procedures. Your standard procedures appear inadequate. Injunction granted." The HOA is prohibited from assessing or collecting fines related to Mr. Davidson's business, pending a full hearing on the validity of the rule change itself. That hearing will be scheduled within 60 days. Walking out of the courthouse, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. Marcus was optimistic that we could get the entire rule thrown out at the full hearing, especially given the judge's clear skepticism. But Patricia was not done. The next week, I started receiving code violation notices for minor issues around my property. My grass was allegedly too long in one section. I was supposedly storing a non-operational vehicle, though my truck worked fine. There were complaints about my fence needing paint. It felt like harassment because it was harassment. Each violation came with a fine if not corrected within 10 days. I dutifully mowed the supposedly long grass, took my truck to a mechanic who certified in writing that it was fully operational, and got estimates for fence painting. Marcus documented everything as further evidence of retaliation. Meanwhile, the Chamber of Commerce ramped up promotion of the awards ceremony. Amanda called to tell me that ticket sales had exceeded expectations, and they were moving the event to a larger venue, the Riverside Convention Center. She also mentioned that City Councilwoman Maria Vasquez would be attending and specifically wanted to meet me. "She is very interested in your story," Amanda said. "She has been pushing for reforms to HOA oversight powers. Your case could be exactly the catalyst she needs to gain support." The awards ceremony was scheduled for a Thursday evening in late May. Sarah bought a new dress for the occasion, and we arranged for her sister to watch the kids. I wore my best suit, the one I had bought for weddings and funerals but rarely had occasion to wear otherwise. The convention center was elegantly decorated, with round tables filling the main hall and a stage set up at the front. I recognized several local business owners I had networked with over the years, along with politicians, media personalities, and community leaders. The energy in the room was genuinely exciting. Amanda found us during the cocktail hour and introduced us to Councilwoman Vasquez, a dynamic woman in her early 40s who had a reputation as a fierce advocate for working families. "Mr. Davidson, I have been following your situation closely," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "What the Meadowbrook Heights HOA is doing is unconscionable. I want you to know that I am working on an ordinance that would require HOAs in Riverside to undergo small business impact reviews before implementing any rules that could affect home-based businesses." "That would have prevented this entire nightmare," I said. "Exactly. The challenge is getting support from other council members. Some of them view HOAs as sacrosanct and worry about government overreach. But cases like yours demonstrate that HOAs themselves can be guilty of overreach. They need oversight." We talked for several more minutes before Amanda had to pull me away to meet other attendees. At one point, I spotted Patricia Henderson across the room. She was there with her husband Donald and her nephew, a guy in his late 20s wearing an ill-fitting suit. She saw me at the same moment, and her expression could have curdled milk. She said something to her husband and nephew, and they quickly made their way toward the exit. The ceremony itself started at 7 o'clock. There were various awards presented throughout the evening, celebrating businesses in categories like innovation, community impact, and growth. Dinner was served between presentations, a surprisingly good chicken dish with roasted vegetables. Finally, Amanda took the stage to present the Resilience in Business Award. She spoke eloquently about entrepreneurship, about the challenges small business owners face, and about the importance of communities supporting rather than hindering economic opportunity. "This year's winner exemplifies resilience in the face of unexpected obstacles," she said. "He built a successful business providing a needed service to our community, only to face opposition from an unlikely source. Despite legal threats, fines, and harassment, He has continued to operate with integrity while fighting for his right to run his business. This award recognizes not just his business success, but his courage in standing up against unjust regulatory overreach. She paused for effect. The inaugural Resilience in Business Award goes to Samuel Davidson of Davidson Container Rentals. The room erupted in applause. I stood, somewhat shocked, and made my way to the stage. Amanda handed me a crystal award, heavy and impressive, with my name and business engraved on a brass plate. A photographer captured the moment with several quick flashes. I had not prepared a speech, but Amanda was handing me a microphone, so I improvised. "Thank you. This is unexpected and incredibly meaningful. When I started my business 3 years ago, I just wanted to provide for my family and build something I could be proud of. I never expected to become some kind of poster child for small business rights." The audience laughed. But here is the thing I have learned through this experience. There are people who build things and people who tear things down. There are people who see opportunity and people who see only threats. My business does not hurt anyone. It provides jobs, serves customers, and contributes to the local economy. The fact that I have had to fight just to keep it alive is absurd. I looked out at the audience and spotted Councilwoman Vasquez nodding encouragingly. I hope this award sends a message. Small businesses are the backbone of American communities. When we make it impossible for entrepreneurs to operate, we all lose. Not just economically, but in terms of opportunity, innovation, and the freedom to build the lives we want. So thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for this recognition, but more importantly, thank you for standing up for small business owners like me who just want a fair chance to succeed. The applause was even louder this time. As I walked off stage, several people stopped me to shake my hand or offer congratulations. A reporter from a local TV station asked if I would do a quick interview, and I agreed. The story ran on the 11 o'clock news that night. Sarah and I watched it together, both exhausted but exhilarated. The segment was maybe 2 minutes long, but it captured the key points. Local business owner wins award despite HOA harassment, questions raised about HOA oversight, councilwoman promises action. The next morning, my phone started ringing early. Customers were calling to congratulate me. Other business owners reached out to share their own HOA struggles. A lawyer from the Institute for Justice, a nonprofit legal organization that fights regulatory abuse, left a message saying they were interested in my case. But the most interesting call came from Gerald Flynn, the HOA's attorney. "Mr. Davidson, I wanted to reach out confidentially to discuss a potential resolution." "I am listening." "Off the record, I have advised the HOA board that their position is legally weak and the publicity is making things worse. However, Mrs. Henderson is resistant to backing down. I am hoping we can find a middle ground that allows everyone to save face." "Gerald, I do not care about anyone's face. I care about running my business without harassment." "I understand." "What if we proposed eliminating the new rule and formally acknowledging that home-based businesses like yours are permitted? In exchange, you would agree not to pursue damages for the fines and legal fees." I thought about it. "I need to talk to my attorney, but that is not acceptable. They have cost me thousands in legal fees and put my family through hell. I want full compensation for damages, and I want a formal apology." Gerald sighed. "Let me see what I can do." That conversation was followed by 2 weeks of negotiation. Marcus handled most of it, but he kept me informed throughout. The HOA was increasingly desperate to settle, especially after the press enterprise ran an investigative piece about Patricia Henderson's nephew, and the apparent conflict of interest in how the rule had been implemented. That article was devastating for Patricia. It revealed that her nephew's moving business had filed for an LLC just 2 weeks before the HOA board meeting where the new rule was proposed. It detailed text messages between Patricia and her nephew, where she explicitly discussed limiting competition. It even included interviews with the other board members, with Tom Morrison confirming that he had felt pressured to vote for the rule change. The Institute for Justice reached out again, this time offering to take my case pro bono if settlement talks failed. They wanted to use it as a test case for HOA reform legislation. Having their backing gave me additional leverage. Finally, in mid-June, we reached an agreement. The HOA would rescind the new rule entirely, pay me $25,000 to cover legal fees and damages, issue a formal written apology, and implement new conflict of interest policies for board members. Additionally, Patricia Henderson would resign as HOA president. The settlement was finalized on a Monday morning in Marcus's office. Patricia was there, barely able to look at me. Her attorney had her sign the various documents without speaking. When it was done, she stood and left without a word. "That must feel good," Marcus said after she was gone. "It feels like it should not have been necessary. But yes, it feels good." The following week, the local news ran a follow-up story about the settlement. Councilwoman Vasquez used it as momentum to push her HOA oversight ordinance, which was scheduled for a vote at the next city council meeting. She invited me to attend and speak during the public comment period. The city council chambers were packed on the night of the vote. Dozens of people showed up to share their own HOA horror stories. I spoke about my experience, emphasizing the need for balance between community governance and individual rights. "HOAs serve a purpose," I said. "They maintain property values and resolve disputes, but they need oversight and accountability. My situation should never have happened, and it will keep happening unless we implement common sense reforms." The ordinance passed 4-3, with 2 council members abstaining. It required HOAs to conduct impact reviews before implementing rules affecting home businesses, established a mandatory waiting period and notification process for rule changes, and created an appeals process for homeowners who believed they were being unfairly targeted. It was not perfect, but it was progress. By July, things had settled into a new normal. My business was stronger than ever, actually benefiting from all the publicity. I had more customers than I could handle and was considering hiring additional help. The Chamber of Commerce had asked me to serve on their Small Business Advisory Committee, and I had accepted. Sarah and I celebrated our anniversary that month with a weekend trip to San Diego, our first getaway without the kids in years. Sitting on the beach on Saturday afternoon watching the waves, she turned to me. "Are you glad you fought?" "Absolutely. It was stressful and expensive and time-consuming, but yes, some things are worth fighting for. I am proud of you. I could not have done it without your support." She smiled and squeezed my hand. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying being together without the weight of litigation hanging over us. When we returned home, there was a letter waiting from the new HOA president, Jennifer Park, who had been voted in after Patricia's resignation. It was brief and welcoming, thanking me for my patience during the transition and expressing hope that we could work together to build a positive community environment. I appreciated the gesture, even if I remained cautious about HOA leadership in general. In August, the Riverside Press Enterprise ran a "Where Are They Now" feature on the 3 finalists for the Resilience in Business Award. The woman with the food truck was expanding to a second vehicle. The veteran with the solar company had just landed a major contract with the city. And me, I was thriving and using my experience to advocate for small business owners facing similar challenges. The reporter, Jessica Torres, asked me what I had learned from the whole experience. I learned that most people want to do the right thing, but systems can enable the wrong people to do a lot of damage. I learned that sunshine really is the best disinfectant. And I learned that standing up for yourself, even when it is scary and uncertain, is always worth it. Any regrets? Not fighting sooner, not making more noise earlier. I kept thinking if I just stayed quiet and followed the rules, everything would work out. But sometimes you have to make noise. Sometimes you have to be willing to fight. What advice would you give to other business owners facing HOA issues? Document everything. Find allies. Do not fight alone. Organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and legal nonprofits exist to help. Use them. And do not give up just because the fight is hard. If your business is legitimate and you are operating ethically, you have every right to defend it. The article ran online first and generated hundreds of comments and shares. Several people reached out to ask for advice on their own HOA disputes. I tried to help where I could, connecting people with resources and sharing what I had learned. By September, nearly 6 months after the initial letter from Patricia Henderson, I realized I had become something I never intended, an accidental activist. The Chamber of Commerce was regularly asking me to speak at events or participate in panels about small business challenges. Councilwoman Vasquez invited me to join a task force on regulatory reform. Local business groups wanted me on their boards. It was flattering but also overwhelming. I had started this journey just wanting to run my container rental business in peace. Now, I was somehow a spokesperson for entrepreneurial rights. Sarah helped me think through which commitments to accept. We decided I would focus on opportunities that could create systemic change rather than just raising my personal profile. That meant the task force work and selective speaking engagements, but turning down most media requests and ceremonial board positions. In October, something unexpected happened. Patricia Henderson's nephew closed his moving business. It turned out he had barely any customers and had been operating mostly on credit from his family. The negative publicity from his aunt's conflict of interest scandal had not helped. The commercial space he had rented sat empty, with a "for lease" sign in the window. I felt no satisfaction in his failure. Competition is healthy, and if he had built a good business, there would have been room for both of us. What bothered me was the principle. Patricia had been willing to destroy my legitimate, successful business to give her underqualified nephew an artificial advantage. That kind of corruption, even at the small scale of an HOA, undermines everything entrepreneurship is supposed to represent. In November, the City Council's task force released its recommendations for broader regulatory reform. We proposed streamlining business license requirements, creating clearer pathways for home-based businesses, and strengthening protections against arbitrary enforcement. Several of the recommendations directly drew from my experience with the HOA. The local business community largely supported the proposals. Even some HOA leaders acknowledged that the current system needed improvement. The reforms were scheduled for a vote in early December. As the year wound down, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed. 12 months earlier, I had been running my business quietly, barely involved in community affairs, content to stay under the radar. Now I was testifying before the City Council, serving on committees and advocating for policy changes. It was not the path I had chosen, but it was the path I found myself on. And despite the stress and challenges, I was grateful. Grateful for the support of people like Amanda Roberts and Marcus Chen. Grateful for customers who stuck with me during the controversy. Grateful for a wife who believed in me even when things looked bleak. Grateful for a community that ultimately sided with fairness and common sense over arbitrary authority. The city council vote happened on a Tuesday evening in mid-December. The chambers were full again, though not as packed as they had been for the HOA oversight ordinance. This time the vote was not close. 6 in favor, 1 opposed. The regulatory reform package passed and would take effect on January 1st. After the vote, several council members came over to shake my hand and thank me for my advocacy. Councilwoman Vasquez was especially gracious. "You started something important, Samuel. These reforms will help hundreds of business owners over the coming years. You should be proud." "I just wanted to run my business," I said, smiling. "The best advocates are the reluctant ones." "You fought because you had to, not because you wanted attention or glory. That authenticity matters." As Sarah and I drove home that night, Christmas lights beginning to appear in neighborhoods around the city, I felt a sense of closure. The fight was over. The reforms were in place. My business was thriving. Life could return to normal, except it did not entirely. Because once you have stood up and fought back, once you have learned that systems can be changed and injustice can be confronted, you cannot really go back to seeing the world the way you did before. People kept reaching out with their own stories of HOA overreach or regulatory harassment. I kept offering advice and connecting them with resources. The Chamber of Commerce kept asking me to mentor new business owners. The work of advocacy, it turned out, was not something you did once and walked away from. It was ongoing. On Christmas Eve, I was in my home office catching up on paperwork when I heard a knock at the door. Sarah answered it, and I heard her call my name with a note of curiosity in her voice. At the door stood a young woman, maybe mid-20s, holding a small gift bag. "Mr. Davidson, I am Emily Patterson. I read about what you went through with your HOA. I have been fighting my own HOA for the past year. They are trying to shut down my online tutoring business. Your story gave me hope and I wanted to thank you. I just won my case last week." She handed me the gift bag. Inside was a bottle of wine and a handwritten note thanking me for my courage. "Emily, congratulations. That is fantastic news. I used the same arguments your lawyer made. The same strategy of involving the Chamber of Commerce and going public with my story. It worked. My HOA backed down completely. We talked for a few more minutes. She explained how she had been tutoring high school students in math and science from a home office, exactly like what I did, and her HOA had tried to classify it as a prohibited commercial activity. Using the playbook from my case, she had fought back and won. After she left, Sarah came and stood beside me at the door. "That was nice," she said. "It was. But it also makes me realize this is not really over. For me, yes, but not for everyone dealing with this stuff. You cannot save everyone, Sam, I know, but I can help where I can." As 2024 turned to 2025, I settled into a rhythm that balanced running my business with the advocacy work that had found me. I kept serving on the task force, mentoring business owners facing regulatory challenges, and speaking occasionally about entrepreneurship and fighting for your rights. My container rental business continued to grow. By January, I had 52 containers in circulation and had hired 2 part-time employees to help with deliveries and logistics. The company that had nearly been destroyed by an HOA president's vindictive overreach was now stronger than ever. In February, the Riverside Chamber of Commerce asked me to serve as a keynote speaker at their annual membership meeting. They wanted me to talk about overcoming adversity and the importance of business community support. I agreed, though public speaking still made me nervous. The speech went well. I focused on practical lessons, the importance of documentation, the value of finding allies, the power of public accountability, and the necessity of standing up for principle even when it is costly. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several business owners approaching me afterward to share their own stories or ask for advice. In March, I received an unexpected email from Patricia Henderson. The subject line just said, "Apology." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. The email was surprisingly candid. She acknowledged that she had let family loyalty cloud her judgment, that she had abused her position as HOA president, and that she was genuinely sorry for the harm she had caused. She mentioned that she had stepped back from community leadership entirely and was focusing on personal reflection and making amends where possible. I read it 3 times, trying to determine if it was sincere or strategic. Marcus, ever the lawyer, advised me not to respond and to save the email in case it became relevant later, but I felt differently. I wrote back a brief message acknowledging her apology and expressing hope that she had learned from the experience. I kept it cordial but not warm. Whether her apology was genuine or not, I realized I had stopped caring about Patricia Henderson months ago. The anger and frustration had faded, replaced by a kind of detached acceptance. She had tried to hurt me and failed. The system had worked, slowly and imperfectly, but it had worked. That was enough. By spring, the ripple effects of my case and the subsequent reforms were becoming visible. The city received its first small business impact reviews from HOAs considering rule changes. 2 of them were sent back for revision as too restrictive. The appeals process handled its first case, ruling in favor of a homeowner running a graphic design business. The system was not perfect, but it was better. In April, I got a call from a producer at a business podcast called The Grind that focused on entrepreneurship stories. They wanted to feature my story in an upcoming episode about fighting regulatory overreach. I agreed, and we recorded the interview over Zoom one afternoon while the kids were at school. The episode aired in May and got a surprising amount of attention. People reached out from across the country, sharing their own HOA nightmares or asking for advice on starting home-based businesses. I tried to respond to as many as possible, though it became overwhelming. One message stood out. It was from a woman in Florida who ran a home-based catering business and was facing almost identical HOA challenges as I had faced. Her HOA had changed rules retroactively, was assessing fines, and appeared to be targeting her specifically because a board member's daughter ran a competing catering company. I spent an hour on the phone with her, sharing everything I had learned. I connected her with the Institute for Justice and suggested she reach out to her local Chamber of Commerce. 3 months later, she emailed to say she had won her case and her HOA had backed down completely. These small victories mattered. Each person who successfully fought back made it a little easier for the next person. Each case created precedent, built community awareness, and chipped away at the assumption that HOAs could act with impunity. By summer of 2025, nearly 18 months after receiving that first threatening letter from Patricia Henderson, my life had found a new equilibrium. The business was stable and profitable. The advocacy work was meaningful but not overwhelming. My family was thriving. On the anniversary of winning the Resilience in Business Award, the Chamber of Commerce hosted a small celebration recognizing the impact the award recipients had made. The veteran with the solar company had now installed systems on over 200 homes. The woman with the food truck had expanded to 3 vehicles, and was planning to open a brick-and-mortar restaurant. And me, I had helped change city policy and inspired other business owners to stand up for their rights. Amanda Roberts gave a short speech about the power of recognizing and supporting entrepreneurs who face adversity. She mentioned that the Resilience in Business Award had become one of their most prestigious honors, with nominations already coming in for next year. Samuel Davidson showed us what courage and persistence look like, she said. He fought not just for himself, but for every small business owner who refuses to accept that unjust rules are inevitable. That is the spirit we need to cultivate in our business community. After the celebration, Sarah and I drove home in comfortable silence. The kids were at summer camp for the week, giving us rare, quiet evenings. We stopped for ice cream, sitting outside the shop and watching people walk by. "You ever wish none of this had happened?" Sarah asked. "That the HOA had just left you alone and you could have kept running your business quietly," I thought about it. Sometimes, the fight was hard and there were moments I wanted to give up. But I also think about Emily Patterson and that woman in Florida and all the other people who were able to fight their own battles because I fought mine publicly. That matters. "You have become quite the activist," she said, smiling. "Reluctant activist." "I still just want to run my container business and watch my kids grow up. But if I can help people along the way, I should." That felt like the right note to end on. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a quiet acceptance that sometimes life pushes you in unexpected directions, and you have to decide whether to resist or lean in. I had chosen to lean in, and while it had been difficult, it had also been worthwhile. My business continued successfully. The reforms I had helped create protected other entrepreneurs. The community was stronger for having held its HOA accountable. And I had learned that standing up for what is right, even when it is scary and uncertain, is always the correct choice. Looking back on everything that had happened, from that first threatening letter to the award from the Chamber of Commerce to the policy changes that followed, I realized the most important lesson was simple. Systems only protect people when people demand protection. Justice only happens when individuals are willing to fight for it. Change only comes when someone refuses to accept the way things are. I had never wanted to be that someone. I had just wanted to run my business and live my life. But when the moment came, when I had to choose between giving up or fighting back, I fought. And in fighting, I discovered that ordinary people can challenge unjust rules, that communities will support fairness when given the chance, and that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That is the story of how an HOA tried to ban my container rental business, how the Chamber of Commerce overruled them and gave me an award, and how one fight over a home-based business became a catalyst for broader change. It was messy and stressful and expensive, but it was also necessary and ultimately successful. As I write this, sitting in the home office that Patricia Henderson once tried to shut down, with my business thriving and reforms in place to protect others, I feel grateful. Grateful for the support I received, grateful for the opportunity to make a difference, and grateful that I found the courage to stand up when it mattered most. The container rental business that started as a way to support my family and spend more time with my kids had become something larger, a symbol of entrepreneurial resilience, and a reminder that even small acts of courage can create meaningful change. That was never the plan, but it was the reality, and I had learned to embrace it.